There's a 0.41% chance of 2018 VP1 crashing to Earth, but then again, this is 2020. Meanwhile, 2020 QG has survived the closest ever shave past Earth at just under 3,000 k's away. And the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter bounces back a few French laser beams, the first time in more than a decade of trying. It's Wednesday, August 26, 2020. I'm Matt Miller at Trekzone HQ. This is Talkin' Science, and we're in the home stretch of our August campaign for 2020. It's day 26, in fact. Can you help us help Guide Dogs Australia? We need you to beam over to bit.ly/TZ Guide Dogs and donate now. Less than a week to go.
With the latest science and space news 5 days a week across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube. This is Talkin' Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And it is a very happy Talkin' Science Wednesday to Dr. Brad Tucker.
How's it going?
Look, really good, except for the fact that spaceaustralia.com reminded me yesterday. Look, I'm making a week of it. It's Pluto demotion week.
It is Pluto demotion week. You know, keeping Pluto in line so it doesn't get too haughty. Look, I'd like to demote Mercury, but that's a different story. I mean, look, Neptune thinks it's all that as well. I know there's a few planets that need to be brought down a peg or two. But yes, 14 years since the vote of the IAU. You know, it's always funny because the International Astronomical Union has 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 members, something like that. And it was only like 2% of people voted. So just like the US election, not many people turned out, which is funny because it's probably been the biggest, most controversial vote ever. And I wonder if people knew what the grief we got now, if people just would have shown up and voted and how that would have changed things. I'd have been interested.
The simple solution here, of course, is to redefine what a planet is and maybe just have a sub-clause for Pluto. Call it the Pluto clause.
Look, it definitely is not the end of this discussion. I would say it's probably only the beginning.
Well, if you want to hit Brad up about how Pluto is a planet, you can do that on Twitter at btucker22. On Facebook as well, Dr. Brad Tucker. Trekzone's all over social media. Don't tell us. We've got no power with the IAU. But let's have a discussion about Pluto and other dwarf planets that are just mistreated in the universe. By searching for Trekzone all over social media. And of course me on Twitter as well, at Merrimatt86. Brad, let us get into the show.
Talking Science headlines.
And Brad, first up, SpaceX has caught its Falcon 9 fairing payload for the second time.
That's right, but it had a beautiful video of it, which I thought was quite hilarious. Mm-hmm. You know, and as we highlighted when they're first attempting to do this and talking about doing this, look, it's a big deal. You know, the fairing is $6 million. Each half is $3 million. So by this fairly simple looking thing, saving $3 million is, you know, that's a lot of money if you think about it on a scale. CubeSat, small satellites that we could build, cost $2 to $3 million. That's essentially the cost of allowing a small satellite to ride for free. These are real numbers that matter, even when the things are so expensive. A few $1 million is still a big deal.
Absolutely. Well, this weekend, the 28th to the 30th of August, Jupiter, Saturn and the Moon are getting together, and they're going to form a nice little lineup in the sky, which would be a nice little treat for stargazers.
So Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, look towards the east in the early evening, and you'll see Jupiter, Moon, and Saturn all hanging out. On Friday, it'll be Jupiter, Saturn, Moon. Then it'll be Jupiter, Moon, Saturn, and then it'll be Moon, Jupiter, Saturn. But it'll form a very nice trio, very quiet. So it's a beautiful thing to go out and see, especially if it's some clear skies. And, you know, what better reason to look up?
Absolutely. And the best part is no telescope required.
That's right. You just need your eyes and a clear view.
Talking Science, stories of the week.
And Brad, diving into the meat of our show this week, a couple of asteroid stories. First up, because it's 2020, there's an asteroid on the way.
Of course there is. Now, you know, this has a 0.5% chance of hitting me.
Less than, even.
In 2020, that means 99% chance of hitting a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, everything's reversed.
And look, just to be clear, this is a fairly small asteroid. We're only talking about 2 meters. And so sometimes the bright fireballs people have seen, these are about that size. So it is not going to be a big event, create a large crater or anything like that. But it definitely is headed for Earth. And there is a small chance, currently about that 1 out of 200, that it does actually impact the Earth, which, yeah.
Well, look, it is all fun and games until a planet gets hit. But as you say, this asteroid is only 2 meters across, 6.5 feet in diameter, according to NASA. So if it does strike the Earth, as you say, it's not really a big deal. It's probably just a really good light show.
It really is. I mean, so what happens with these things is they're traveling so fast, they hit the Earth's atmosphere, and they explode and break apart.
Like a bug on the windshield.
Exactly, that's right. And in the case of something that's 2 meters, yes, it will do that, and you'll hear a sonic boom. And if you're right under it, you may even feel the shockwave, but it won't be that widespread or big. To put this in the scale, the Chelyabinsk one that happened over 2013, that was caught on dash cam and everything like that, that was 20 meters wide. So this is 10 times smaller. So it is a small thing. And even that didn't create a big crater or, do a huge amount of damage. It did do damage. So this one will be small, as he said. So it would turn on to be a big light show. Small fragments would probably reach the ground, but nothing of where it's actually creating a crater. So, as he said, apart from an interesting show above your skies, very little in terms of damage.
The interesting thing with this, I think this is the universe sending us a warning about what is planned for the next day after this asteroid is expected to come past Earth. It's the US presidential election day.
That's right. It is the day with the US presidential election, which always, makes life interesting and keeps people on their toes, I guess is maybe the right word. We'll see how it goes. But it definitely is something that is on the radar to wake people up. Maybe.
Absolutely. Well, meanwhile, another asteroid has piqued some curiosity as well, because 2020 QG flew past at less than 3,000 Ks away, and it survived. Now, that's a first, I think.
It is. It is the closest asteroid that's been detected that didn't hit the Earth. Mostly we see these small asteroids when they're hitting the Earth. For obvious reasons. We only usually see the other big ones as they're kind of scooting by and flying off into space. It's really hard to see the in-between one. And in this case, it was it came from around the sun. So there's this blind spot, just like with driving, and it's near the sun. And so you don't usually look towards there because it's hard to see. So it came from near the position of the sky in the sun, saw it fairly pretty much as it was skimming by the Earth and saying, giving us a hello and continuing off into space. So definitely a reminder that, these things are out there, and that's why people look for them.
What I love with some asteroid finding is that sometimes the discoveries are made after they've passed by. And we can just say, oh, that was a close one.
That's right. It's kind of like a zip, and all of a sudden, whoa, you didn't realize that you were actually in harm's way. And this one was bigger than the one that potentially may hit the Earth in November. This was about 5 meters wide. So again, it would have been a little bit more explosive, a little bit bigger of an impact. But again, still not destroying a city or anything like that, but you wouldn't want to stand under it.
With this one, Brad, the Palomar Observatory didn't detect it until about 6 hours after the object's closest approach. Just going to show there that, as you say, there are so many things out there hurtling towards us that we've just got to keep our eyes peeled.
That's exactly right. And ZTF, this Wiki Transient Factory, which found this, it's just doing an all-sky search to search for things in the sky, mostly explosions, but it finds these things zipping by as well. And sometimes it's, as you said, it's after it passes that you see it.
And it was traveling at about 44,400 kilometers per hour. That's a little bit quick.
Yeah, these things can move fast. They can definitely pick up speed. The one which may hit on the 2nd of November is traveling, again, the data's poor, but around 80,000 kilometers an hour.
Absolutely incredible. It flew over the Pacific Ocean in the far east of Australia, so it could have landed there and made a splash.
That's right, but and that's always the other point is most of the Earth is uninhabited, oceans, Antarctica. So even if these things hit, it's unlikely to hit over a populated area or even an inhabited area for that matter. So the risk is low. And that's also why we focus on the bigger ones, because the bigger ones can do a lot more damage. Just as, getting hit by a bicycle, a car, okay, not great. Getting hit by a freight train it's not going to be well. So, we focus on the freight trains in space.
I just want to pull you up too, Brad, saying that Antarctica isn't inhabited. Think of the penguins.
Look, think of the penguins. They can fend for themselves. They're fine. They can jump in the water for a few minutes.
Brilliant.
You can get social with Trekzone. Australia's unofficial home of Star Trek is everywhere you are. Just search for Trekzone.
Moving on to our last story of the week, and we're bouncing lasers off the moon. Now, we've been doing this for a little while, ever since Apollo dropped a few reflectors on the surface, but this is the first time that we've been able to ping something back from orbit, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, to be precise.
That's right. So the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has been up there 8 or 9 years now. It's had one of these mirrors, as you said, that the Apollo missions and other places and the Russian Lukoil probes have put on the surface of the moon. And they've tried for a number of years to hit the mirror. I mean, you're trying to hit a target that's a couple meters at best, 380,000 kilometers away, that's moving around an object. It's pretty tricky. They've been trying this for a long time, and there's lots of reasons they've been trying it. So they finally got their first successful lock of bouncing it, because you need to bounce it off the mirror, but then you also need to bounce it back to Earth. So you need to hit it in the right way. You can't just reflect it off the side and it hit the surface of the moon or something, because you want to obviously have that light come back to Earth and be detected. So for the first time, they finally got it done, which was it's a pretty big achievement if you think about it.
It absolutely is, and I guess while the surface of the moon doesn't kind of move, I mean, it's moving in the orbit, but it's almost relatively a fixed position compared to the LRO's orbit, just whizzing around the moon there.
That's exactly right. It's a pretty easy to lock on the surface versus the mirror on the orbiter. And there is actually quite an important reason they've tried. They've noticed that the sensitivity, or how much light is bouncing back from the ones on the moon, has been getting less and less, that it's the bouncing, or the mirror, the reflectivity is weakening. And there's two reasons. One, it could just be the solar weather and radiation is wearing away the quality of the mirrors. So they want to figure out if that's the case. So it tells us about materials on the space and the moon useful for future exploration. Or it could be that there's actually weathering happening, and just as on Mars, you're getting dust, the lunar regolith, blowing on the mirrors, giving a little bit more coating and dust on it. So again, it's desensitizing the mirror and how much light can be reflective. So by aiming at this one on the orbiter, they can tell, is there some weathering things? What are the problems related to maybe the dust, and what's going on with these ones on the surface?
And it takes about 2.5 seconds for the light to return, and using all the math, they can work out the distance to the object and exactly what's happening a lot better than say I could by shooting a laser pointer at the moon.
Yeah, look, it's pretty amazing, right? We know the speed of light quite well, and so it's just a stopwatch, right? You're shooting a laser, you time it, you figure out when it arrives. And it gives you a very precise distance. We know the distance to the moon within a millimeter. That's pretty amazing. Something that's 384,000 kilometers away on average, and you can know the precision to a millimeter. That is accurate. And look, this is also just important for future lunar exploration. As we've talked about lots of times, the moon has very little gravity, an atmosphere, which means landing on the surface is always tricky. So you have to plan it well. As we've seen, sometimes it doesn't always go well. So, if you're off by, say, a meter, and you're descending at the rate of 7 meters per second, that's a big difference where you stop, right? That's, stopping on target versus stopping a meter underground, i.e. hitting hard. So these things do matter for future lunar exploration as well.
And the mirrors involved in this, or the mirror on the LRO, it's not just your standard bathroom mirror. This one's pretty complex. It's what's called a corner cube. It's a series of three-dimensional mirrors, each literally shaped like the inside of one corner of a cube, and it's that bouncing that helps to get the reflection with pinpoint accuracy.
That's right. It's a very weird disco ball looking thing. Yeah, these little cubes that reflect it, because obviously you just can't have a flat plane mirror because the angle isn't necessarily working out, and the amount of light and the angle will change it. So you need this cube to kind of bounce, and then bounce back to Earth. So you really get these internal reflections, and so it actually comes at the right angle back to your telescope because you want it to arrive or come back to the point of origin, which a normal flat mirror can't do. And also, the quality of the reflection is not the same.
Now, one thing I found interesting in researching this article, Brad, was that the movement of the LRO, it's moving too fast and too unpredictably to reliably hit with the laser. I would have thought that being in orbit and away from an object that we know to millimetre precision, that we would be able to more reliably predict how this thing's going to move.
It's just this highlight that we're still understanding astrodynamics, is called the movement of objects in space, but around the moon, we have a decent understanding around Earth, but things like the Earth's atmosphere and drag create havocs and predictions of the orbits and movements. These aren't perfect circles. Same with the moon. There is a tiny bit of atmosphere. It's not very high, but all these little implications from gravity to the changing distance of the moon to any little bit of atmospheric drag closer to the surface, they all affect the movement of objects around the moon. And subtle variations can create very big differences. So, it just goes to show that it's not as just simple as sending something to the moon. We're so used to it now, but you don't just say, all right, I'm just going to press go and it's going to go and it's going to stay there. There's a lot more nuances to it. And this highlights that.
It absolutely does. And if the research proves that it's a bit of moon dust sweeping across those reflectors on the surface, we've got the Artemis missions heading there in the next few years. We might just have to get them to take some cleaning cloths.
That's exactly right. But it's also useful for the future Artemis mission, right? It's going to be solar power. How often do they need to clean the solar panels because of lunar dust? If it's radiation, and i.e. these things are just wearing down over time, again, that tells you about life expectancy, the impact of radiation and solar storms on the surface of the moon. So either way, it's a big piece of the puzzle to future lunar exploration.
Especially if we want to stay on the moon.
That's exactly right. If we want to stay there for any long period of time, we're going to be going through the same issues that this equipment has gone through already. So definitely worth noting.
Absolutely, Brad. Well, what a fascinating week to talk science with you. Plenty of asteroid news and some lunar news as well, which is pretty exciting. But of course, we just can't get I just can't get past the fact that it's Pluto demotion week.
Pluto will survive, so will you.
Pluto's been surviving for a few million years.
That's right. Pluto's dealt with it.
Pluto dealt with it before it knew it was a thing.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
All right, Brad, we'll catch you again next week for another edition of Talkin' Science.
Take care.